Welcome to Manager Tools, the weekly thank you. This cast answers these questions. How can I improve morale? How can I encourage my team during difficult times? Does thanking my people help generally? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go.
Our current environment of working remotely, or even when we go back to our new socially distanced offices, can make effective communications harder and yet even more critical. In 4 hours, we can teach your team our effective communicator guidance virtually. We use DISC as a tool so that your team can improve their relationships and have more positive exchanges with peers, customers, bosses, and directs. Getting your group of 30 people together can also be a great team building experience during these times. Our guidance is solid, the delivery and content is fun, and DISC and our guidance can be used in all walks of life. Let us share how we can do this for your team. Contact Maggie at manager-tools.com.
Well, many of us managers think that someone doing their jobs isn't worthy of praise or positive feedback or even just simple thanks. And and we're wrong. When I mean I mean I include myself in that.
Yeah. Hey, he just did his job. He didn't,
what's there
special?
Yeah,
that's
really.
what I pay him for. He gets paid. It's a good deal.
He took out the trash. He got his allowance. What the heck does he want from me? But that's wrong, right? I mean, that's just wrong-headed thinking.
Yeah. And there's been a rise of that, in my opinion. Totally my estimation after 30 years of doing this, that, we develop better and better measures, and we're more and more analytical and numerical, and, things constantly, slowly, glacially improve. And there's a department called HR, and so humans are just resources. And I think too many managers, and I think there are more managers who are more technical, more analytical, more logical, more rational, and no offense, but less empathetic, less people focused. And, our directs, our team members, our associates are people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to people, plain old common decency and kindness and encouragement are so underused that if you did it regularly, if you didn't take the workplace approach, which is kind of to take that stuff out of the workplace and make it, Star Trek-like, Spock-like, simply doing the logical thing. In fact, I think there's a craze sweeping the nation here in 2020 that, I have data. And if you don't have data, by definition, my idea is better. And the fact is that kindness and compassion and encouragement can be competitive advantages. Now, look, you shouldn't fake it. We hope you mean it in this guidance where we say, tell your folks thank you. We know that directs tell us they love it. So we've got 3 recommendations. We have tested these, not to the level of creating data, but enough to know that there are basically 3 ways you can say thanks to your folks. Level 1 thanks is writing something to your entire team, or perhaps more than just your team if you're a director or above, and we'll talk about that. Level 2 is going to individual written thanks, emails, text messages, and if you really want to go full saffron, you would do a handwritten note.
Full saffron, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. we made a statement in the podcast about interviewing, I think, about thank you notes are the saffron of relationships. Saffron being for a long time, time in the history of the world, saffron was the most expensive condiment or spice.
There you go, folks. No extra money for that. Just
exactly. Just a little bone lot there.
You said at your next cocktail party, you'll impress people. I guarantee it.
Excuse me. Pardon me. Do you have any saffron? No, but we have Grey Poupon. And level 3 thanks is going face to face, and it could be by video in today's world. So individual video, Zoom, or ideally face to face thanks. Simple, really. I mean, just say thanks, and we'll give you some examples here.
Okay, so let's talk about level 1, group written thanks. The easy out, by the way.
Yeah, some people won't do it because they're like, well, it's not me. It's not authentic. authentic, the stupidest word in the English language. I'm going to be authentic, and you have to relate to me. I'm just going to be me. Like, yeah, okay, but you're working in an organization. What about you we're supposed to be respectful to you. How about you being respectful to the organization? Like wearing long pants. So bottom line up front, once a week, Fridays are best, but it doesn't have to be. You could have a busy Monday and Tuesday and even Wednesday, and then say, okay, I want to say something here before people go home and for the first night this week, get a reasonable amount of sleep. What we recommend you do is send a group text or a Slack or a message to your team, to your team members, to your directs, saying thanks for their hard work. Just that. We're recording this during 2020, governmental lockdowns, because of COVID fears. Our colleagues, our directs are facing special levels of stress, definitely higher than normal. And if we managers don't do something to counterbalance that, we're missing a dead simple opportunity to help our directs. The idea that we're going through it, they're going through it, and we're not talking about it, and we're not upping our positive feedback, our appreciation, our asking after people, our concern. If we're not doing that, we're crazy. I mean, management is not a system of levers and pulleys. It's about getting the most about people, and people exist in a context of their lives. And for many people, and maybe for some of us, for most of our people, the most important part of their lives is not the work they do. There are some people who live to work, but there are far more who work to live. And when you think about it, in light of the economic difficulties that are ensuing, thanks to the lockdowns and the governmental reaction, at the same time that our folks are going through this with their families and their extended families, their friends, colleagues, neighborhoods, so on, we need their best. It's one thing to say, oh, you're having a hard time. Take it easy for a couple of weeks. I mean, literally, this is exactly the opposite of that. This is probably the most stress, the most people, if we average it out and multiplied it, that have been in at the same time that we, for many of us, need our people to be at their very best over the last 12 years since 2008. And for many firms unrelated to housing, even longer than that. Job security worries, family tensions, neighborhood degradation, immediate family health worries, kids going back to school worries, extended family health worries, parents that are, or grandparents that are potentially at risk, and corporate health worries. How's the company doing? I've talked to several people who says, I have great opportunity. And then they suddenly realize, wow, I'm new here, and last in, first out kind of thing. And you might say, okay, how can I be sure my people are facing these issues? And the answer is easy, because you are, right? Unless you're completely unconnected to the world, what the world is going through is happening to you. You know it. And whatever's happening to you, if we're talking about global or economic or systemic, if it's happening to you, it's happening to your folks. And what's more, we know that managers usually score higher in optimism than their direct reports. So whatever fears we're having as managers are higher, a level down, less control, less influence over their career. The lower you go, the more you believe, I'm one of the ones who could get cut. And then you go further up, and it gets easier, because the executive who's worth millions, I mean, no offense, many of them will all argue to the contrary, but the executive worth millions who realizes, hopefully has been smart enough not to have it all tied up in other ventures, has probably lost touch with the real feelings of insecurity of those people several levels below him or her, especially individual contributors. They just say, well, we're good. And they tell their spouse, we're good. If it all falls apart, we lose the job, we'll be okay for a couple of years. We'll be drawing down on what we thought was our retirement, maybe, or, maybe we won't buy that other business, but we have enough money, particularly if we're careful about our expenses now. We'll be fine for a year or two. That's not how the rest of the world feels. I mean, they weren't fine after a month. I still can't believe that the statistic I remember seeing in March, April, or May was that the average small business had 10 or 15 or maybe 18 days at the most cash for operating. And if you shut the business down and there is no cash, even if you lay everybody off, there's rent and there's leases and there's payments to be made, capital expenses and so on. So, again, I'll say I feel a special concern for those folks who, thanks to the economic boom running through February, there were a lot of people hired in 2019. Those people are definitely feeling that last in, first out kind of sense of, wow, I mean, I might be important, but there are other people who have been here a lot longer than me. So what do you say? How do you say it? In keeping with good manager tools tradition, never dreaming when we started that scripting things for folks would be helpful. Here are some examples. So it could be as easy as a text message or Slack message that says, hey folks, we had a busy week. Thank you for your hard work. Lately, things haven't been easy. I know we all feel stress every day, but there's also time for thanks and you've earned it. Well done. I think there's only 2 commas in that bit there. Less commas are generally better, folks. Now watch, Mike. My next one will have 55 commas on it.
I'm reading it. I'm looking.
Yeah.
No, you passed.
Yeah. Okay, good. Busy week this week, and a lot of stuff got done. It's easy to see mistakes and focus on them, but you work hard and you do your best, and I see it, and I know it, and I don't say it enough. Count your blessings this weekend. By the way, that bit about it's easy to see mistakes and focus on them, that's a significant problem for some managers, not for a majority, but for 20, 30% of managers. They see their job as correcting mistakes, and that'll bite you at a time like this. People are at risk. People are scared. People are worried about their family's health, about their kids going back to school, about whether or not their spouse will be able to go back to work because he or she's been staying home. And then they find out that as good a work as they do, all you do is point out the errors. I wouldn't want to be you. Here's another one. Tough week, everybody. Lots of tough weeks lately, but I'm proud to work with you. I appreciate the hard work amongst the challenges we face. Thank you for your work, your communications, and your attitude. It's a privilege to work with you. Now, I got to tell you, if you've never sent something like this and you send it after your directs stop texting each other saying, which alien stole my boss and transplanted this guy for him, they'll feel like, wow, that's actually pretty good. Now, if you're a jerk, this won't help.
There's no
They'll
helping
just
you.
think it's lipstick on a pig. But so don't be a jerk. That's a good one. And that's really it. Those are 3 examples. 30 seconds of work to type that out on your phone. Maybe one of the highest managerial ROI activities you can engage in. And of course, this follows directly and specifically. This is simply a bunch of specific examples to our previous guidance from probably 10 or 12 years ago. One kind thing. We recommend trying to do one kind thing every day to keep your workplace humane and to get your head up out of the work stream periodically.
Yeah. The funny thing about this is that I'll talk to folks, managers, and they'll be worried about following our advice, particularly right after we put out a podcast, because their folks are listening to the cast as well. And so they worry that they'll be seen as manipulative or whatever. And it turns out that, it really doesn't matter. They'll realize that you're following our guidance because they'll have listened to it as well, and they'll still appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's your other choice? Not doing it. And them knowing that you listened and you going, not doing that. They don't need that. It takes too long. I'm too important.
That's a great point.
I don't know if you know, but I'm somebody and, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
So I'd be willing to bet, you mentioned directs and managers both listening. We'd bet at least one of you out there in the big audience will receive one of these suggested notes, you'll know your boss is following our guidance, and you'll still feel appreciated, and you'll still be thankful. So if that happens to you, send us a note. We'll mention it on air. Now, look, if you're a director or above and you want to do this, it does work. Okay. But the higher you go, the more levels you're trying to reach through. And of course, a text message to 80 people or maybe problematic, but a Slack message might work, although generally it would be email, and email, it would work as well. Although the first thing people will see if they get an email, if they don't know it's a group email, they'll think, oh, my boss's emailed me at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon. That's not good.
I don't know. Maybe this won't sound good, but when you talked about either Slack or messaging or email, I think email mainly because it's easier to save. Sometimes people save these things. And
Yeah.
number two, it's easy to forward. And I'd like something like that to be forwarded through my organization for those who didn't get a chance to see it.
Yeah, email feels to me very corporate. A text message doesn't. I can snap a photo out on my phone very quickly. A Slack would work. Again, the higher you get up, I think the more likely you have to move toward email, and the more specifics you need to mention. Now, you don't want to send out a note to everybody thanking one team for one thing that they did that was big. This is a general, I'd like to think not generic, but a general thank you. But if you're trying to reach 100 people, my experience has been when I've encouraged executives that I was working with to do this, I've encouraged them to mention a couple of things. Some of them that have really good relationships don't have to. They just say, hey guys, I don't say this often enough. Thank you ever so much for hard work this week. Tough times behind us, tough times ahead. It's nice to know I'm working with good people. I mean, it sounds corny. Some people are rolling their eyes right now, getting a sugar rush just for me saying it, let alone contemplating them doing it. And it still is wonderful every time. I told somebody wrote me a note and said, I think it was from Things I Think. And they told me how much it meant that somebody had written them a note. And I said, I still have a basket underneath my desk. Actually, I moved it because I moved my desk around a little bit, but full of thank you cards. I mean, probably 200 or 300 of them. And when I'm having a crummy day, I reach in there and pull out a few and read them and go, yeah, you're not that bad a guy. It's okay. You've helped people. So as we say, handwritten is ideal, right? But we also know that 10 handwritten notes to each of your directs on a particular Friday may be burdensome. Now, let me say something else here. We don't have data on this recommendation only because we've never tried to measure it specifically. And as we said earlier, if you're a hated boss, if you're feared, and you've never shown much interest in your people, it probably won't work at all. You probably won't be very good at it either. You'll probably ask somebody else to write it for you. But for the rest of us, if you're not completely data-driven, at some point, at least in my experience, 1,000 anecdotes becomes enough to believe in. If you're the manager who receives a huge document and you think it's your first responsibility to find the mistakes, to open the spreadsheet, to find the error in tab 19, cell D34, you probably need to do something to offset your team's perception of you as a perfectionist. And generally, perfectionists are also seen as ungrateful. Okay. In fact, one of my favorite books of the last 10 or 15 years is Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There, the transition to being an executive. And the first one is adding too much value, meaning somebody in your team sends you something and you're like, yeah, okay. And let's do this and this and this and this and this because this isn't good and this isn't good. We need to tweak this, 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 and this. And after a while, it becomes what you're known for, taking other people's ideas, belittling them, making them better, and then rolling them out as yours. Even if you don't intend to make them yours, the higher up you go, the harder you have to push to make sure that people with the original idea get credit for the idea because you're going to be the one, if it goes into your organization, that's going to drive it. And look, some managers tell me, they write me when I say something on air and they say, well, did you have data for that particular point? And I say, no, I didn't. I was just making an observation that seemed reasonable to me after 30 years of studying managers. Feel free to ignore it. It's no problem at all. And I get the impression there are managers who would say, if you don't have data, I'm not changing. And I always wonder, what did they do when they started managing? They didn't have any data. They didn't know where to go for data. There's not enough data. I mean, maybe some of you listened to Manager Tools and started doing one-on-ones and feedback and coaching and delegation. But other than that, having to have data to take any action makes any job impossible, right?
Well, it's an excuse not to do anything different.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a reasonable surmise, but I would say, I just don't get it. Without guessing at malign intentions, I'm like, dude, really? You expect data for everything? It must be a lonely existence. I wonder if a person who needs data for everything would never eat a donut, which may be the apotheosis of human existence. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about it before, and not to be Debbie Downer here, but if you ask them, do they have any data to support their existing management style? Of course, the answer is, well, no.
No.
Right. So, okay.
Yeah. So data is a defense against newness, which is a recipe for obsolescence at some point.
The great thing is that I think most people listening to this podcast don't fall into that category, or they wouldn't be listening, frankly, because there'll never be enough data for those folks.
Yeah. And look, for us GTD folks or process folks, or if you're a calendar hawk like I am, or a to-do list person, create a recurring reminder in whatever system you use or choose. It'll pop or bleep or bing or chime, and you'll spend 30 seconds saying something valuable and appreciated, especially when everybody needs a little salve for their wounds. So simple.
Hey, did you hear? With our latest edition of a virtual Effective Hiring Manager conference, all 3 of our conference events, EMC, ECC, and EHMC, can now be attended virtually. The first Effective Hiring Manager conference will take place August 24th and 25th and will be delivered in 2 half-day sessions. Check it out at manager-tools.com/training to register today.
All right. Level 2.
All right.
Now we go to individual written thanks.
Always better if you can do it.
Yeah, group messages work. We've seen it happen over and over again, and individual thanks are even better. Examples. Cassie, thanks especially for your detail-conscious management of client presentations and reminders. I feel better going into a presentation having gotten the basics from you. That's actually true. I've got ones here for Manager Tools folks. Sarah, thanks for all the time you spent this week wrestling with all the conflicting and hard-to-find data about travel closures and restrictions. I have complete confidence that our projections for revenue and costs are precise, which is exactly what we need right now, some form of certainty. Maggie, thanks for the hard work securing 3 more client engagements this week. I know it's lonely work, and sometimes it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 messages to get through. A lot of folks would have given up, but you never do. Well done. Paul, thanks for the download data and analysis this week. The more we know, the better we can address how to grow our downloads and our listeners. That's the heart of our business. Well done. It's not rocket science. And look, you can do a group message, and you can also do some individual messages. So you send the group, it takes 30, 45 seconds. Don't overthink it. Okay, the more you overthink it, the less it'll sound like you. And then maybe 1 or 2 other messages for somebody who really stood out. Nothing wrong with that. And again, I'll just say again, if ever there was a time for this kind of stuff, for one kind thing, for a thank you note, for something to ease the burden, now's the time.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about the examples you shared with us. And I don't want to take this down some rabbit hole, but I'm sure there are many longtime listeners are going, man, those kind of sounded like feedback. They're not feedback, but tell me the difference, because they sounded a lot like feedback.
Yeah.
To the uninitiated. Let me say, you could mistake them to be feedback.
I could? No, I don't think I could. No, they're not. feedback, they're praise. Well, you could argue that they are performance communications, and the state of managerial vocabulary is so obscenely bad that what you call feedback, I call a performance review. What you call thank yous, I call negative feedback. To me, when I say feedback, it means, hey, can you give some feedback? When you do that, it's great. Now, if you're saying that each of these, I haven't looked at them. I'm not looking at them right now. I wrote them last night. If they sound like you did something and here's the outcome from it, that is entirely possible and probably comes from the fact that that's how I think. I've spent the last 25 years thinking that way. I can't imagine a simpler way. And in this particular case, we have literally mounds of data. If you piled up all the paper in my office of reports and figures and means and modes and everything else, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of examples. And so in my head, the fundamental structure of a performance communication is here's what you did and here's what the results were. And that also goes to the underlying principle that makes all organizations run, which is aggregated behavior is organizational performance. So yeah, I suspect that's true. But to me, well, first of all, anybody who knows us knows you wouldn't put that in writing, except for the folks over at Zapier, Hi Wade. And that's okay. But if it does sound that way, if anyone's listening and it says, ooh, that sounds like feedback, I would say, oh my, we're being very generic about these words. And the second thing I would say, okay, though, you've had that experience, write it differently. I mean, look, you could start by saying, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. Now, by definition, that would not be feedback because now you've told me how you feel or what the result is of what I did. And you could choose not to include anything in there. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. You're an important part of this team, and I'm glad you're here.
Yes, I thought that's what you'd say, that would be fine when giving praise to do that. Now, the advantage I see in what you did was, and I think it's more effective, and I think it'd be more appreciated by a direct, is if you say thanks for something specific they did, it sounds more genuine. If you just say, hey, thanks for the hard work this week, well, I could say that praise to anyone. Yeah. But if I point out something specific you did,
it means you're paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think that I really like the example. So I didn't raise it as a point of contention or a disagreement. If I got that kind of praise, I would like somebody to tell me, what did I do that they really appreciated? So
yeah, I think the point I was trying to make, I maybe didn't make it as good as I could have, which was a note to the entire team is less likely to easily include specific things because teams are often fragmented. And so they didn't contribute to one single thing. Some of the team did one thing on Tuesday. Another part of the team did something on Thursday, but maybe you don't have a uniform thing. You can just mention one thing. And I wouldn't send a note to only my directs that included individual things that everybody did. Heaven forbid I miss one person and they think it's a kiss of death or something. So I stay generally fairly generic with the team, but I would contrast that with something specific that would show them why that I chose to, single them out in addition to the team note. And this is me. It's not driven by data. It's driven by an awful lot of experience. So other people will handle it differently. Somebody out there will say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send one of those electronic cards that sing. And I'm going to probably say, okay, if you know your people and you think one of your people or more would actually appreciate something a little bit humorous, okay, great. Let us know how it goes. I probably wouldn't do that. I used to handwrite notes on my stationery and then take a picture of it and text it to Wendy. So, people say, I wouldn't send an electronic card. I think that's kind of an electronic card. I didn't have to go to a website to get it. I don't like those cards, by the way.
No,
I don't want you sending me a thank you card, creating an obligation on my part to go do something. But hey, that's just me.
And
let's go. Yeah. Okay, good. We'll start.
There's two of us at least.
Yeah. All right, level 3 things. Now we're going individual and we're trying to go face to face, although probably we're going to use Zoom. Written is good, individual is better, and face to face is best of all. If you don't have a standing rule about folks taking unplanned calls from you, meaning their Zoom line is open or their Skype line is open or their FaceTime line is open, right? Ping them, text them, Slack them and say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? When they say yes, call them. Whatever technology you want to use, phone is fine too. I didn't even include phone in that first list. Wow. The video is better than just phone, but consider your bandwidth and all that sort of stuff. We suspect that the first thought they have about why you're calling late in the day on a Friday is not a good one. Imagine you see them and you see their surprise and you see their nerves at the beginning, but then you probably don't see their delight because they think it's less than professional when you just take 1 minute to say thanks. I mean, it's not hard. So examples. Hey, sorry to bother you late in the day on Friday. Before you go home, I know you worked hard this week. You did good work on scheduling those client meetings. Well done. Or, hey, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to say thanks for your hard work on the briefing decks. You weren't there, but I got thanked, and it was because of your work in preparing the brief, so thank you. Another one. Hey, I'm just calling to say thanks. Busy week. I'm still sorting it out in my head. I'm sure there's 10 things you did that I don't know about that were fantastic. And even if I don't know about it, in the back of my mind, I should probably show you more appreciation. So I appreciate the work and I appreciate you. Thanks for being part of the team. Or, hey, nice work on your numbers for this week. Plenty to do, plenty of distractions, but those 4 numbers, the ones that you maxed out this week, are the most important building blocks that we pay attention to. Way to focus. And then we'll add something else here, a bonus for those of you who are still reading or listening. Why not end your staff or team meeting every week with a general thanks? In my head, Mike, I'm sure some people of a certain age, our age, will remember this. It's like the ending.
I know where you're going. I think
the ending of the opening briefing on Hill Street Blues.
Exactly.
When the sergeant said, and hey, let's be careful out there.
I knew you were going there.
So good. So, and then the theme music starts. Mike Post's theme music, which is, if you've not ever heard the theme song to Hill Street Blues, folks, if you've never heard of that show, you should listen to that. Mike Post also did the theme music for Rockford Files. Another series or movie that you may never have heard of.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And it's good to show your elders some respect. But my favorite one, actually, Hill Street Blues is my favorite, but the favorite show of all those is Magnum PI.
And yet another one that most of our audience probably didn't see.
Yeah. Actually, there is a new Magnum PI now.
Yeah. Oh my God, we're so old.
Yes. And we're still smart and effective. So, you could just at the end of your staff meeting. Now, if your staff meeting is Monday morning, which is a dumb idea, by the way, no staff meetings Monday mornings. But if your staff meeting is Monday morning or Monday afternoon or whatever, you probably can't just give a thank you, but you could end the staff meeting on a high note. But why not end with a general thanks and say something like, hey guys, thanks for all you do every day, every week. We talk a lot here about how to get better and analyzing the gap between where we are and where we could be and being candid about our mistakes. But I don't say enough about how often we do get better. And that's because you're smart and you work hard. Well done. And hey, if we were at school, Mike, we'd say take big bites.
There you go.
Okay. So in the interest of time, I ramble a little bit here. I apologize. Employees, contractors, individual contributors, even managers could all use more thanks for their accomplishments. And yes, they could use thanks even just for their efforts. More effort is better than less effort. It's not just a good idea to reward top performers. It's our responsibility to encourage all performers. And sometimes in a world like today, courage is good. That's what encourage means. It means to imbue the other person with courage, to get on with it. We can't count the number of notes we've received over the years from a listener saying one small thing we said gave them encouragement or hope, even when we didn't mean it, or it gave them a feeling of satisfaction or appreciation. You don't need much of a plan. It's not a project. You don't need to measure it. It's simply a human commitment to be appreciative of others' efforts, to help us and the organization succeed, because kindness is a motivator too.
Awesome, dude. Enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, sir.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you all next week.